I just told my fiance the story of the Snyder Cut. She hasn't ever seen the DCEU films. She has seen the Marvel stuff, but she hasn't seen anything from the DCEU. I think we actually watched Shazam together. We watched Birds of Prey together, but those are a little outside of what I'm talking about, which is the Zack Snyder films. The ones that started with Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and some of the ones that were connected more to that up until Justice League was released, and then they decided to mostly abandon that plan. But I explained everything that happened since the release of Batman v Superman and how Justice League was mostly taken away from Zack Snyder, was re-edited, retooled, reshot, and some, if not most of it, was reshot. Um, and how now they will be releasing the Snyder Cut. And she was so interested in the story that now she wants, to watch it. She's intrigued, and I was like, see, that's a good selling point. Someone should just explain the story of the Snyder Cut, and then people will want to watch it. I just think it's a cool moment in movies. And I know there's been some people, detractors of it, who have said, well, there's a toxic fan base behind it. And I mean, I get that. There's people who are toxic in the community, but I feel that every community has a lot of toxic people. I actually felt like the community that, as far as this community went, the ones who were trying to push for this Snyder Cut early on, were not nearly on the same vitriol that some Star Wars fans have, or other fan communities. I actually thought this community was very good about what they were trying to do, which was just to see a movie that they wanted to see. It's finally coming out. It's going to be on HBO Max. And, I wasn't a huge fan of the Zack Snyder stuff. I've never been, a huge fan of any of his movies. He has a very neat style. I appreciate it. It's not my favorite, but it does make the movies enjoyable to watch, even if they feel a little long and maybe the stories start to drag on in places, feel a bit random in other places, and have too many characters. I've never seen 300, but Watchmen is probably his best work, maybe, but definitely feels long, and even his director's cut is longer, and maybe not everything is necessary with it, even though it's a very complete telling of the original comic book, or a graphic novel anyway. Man of Steel, I felt the same way, where I was like, it's a little long. It's starting to be a little too much like The Dark Knight, and or Batman Begins anyway. I guess the Dark Knight trilogy is what I meant, but I could tell that they were taking a lot of influence from the Nolan films to try to craft something like that for Superman, and it just kind of dragged on a little too much. It was a bit full of itself, and I never really got into that one either. And Batman v Superman at the time I thought was pretty bad, watching it in theaters. I have rewatched it. I watched the Ultimate Cut the other day, and it actually has grown on me. It's been a few years, but now that it might be because I know the story so well at this point. It might be kind of like what happened with the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where the story was so ridiculous, all over the place, kind of hard to understand. But since I watched it so much, or at least read enough about it, I started to understand the story too well that it didn't confuse me anymore, even though it is a confusing story. So then I'm into it. Kind of happened with Batman v Superman. There's a lot of confusing stuff going on. I still don't think they explain Lex Luthor's plan in a detailed manner, but I started to get into it now that I understand what he's actually doing. And, it's not as bad or as laughable as of a movie as I previously thought. A lot of it can just be, oh, it's a comic book movie. There's usually silliness like this. And I'm like, right. It's just because the movie seems so serious and has such a dark tone. I kind of forget that maybe it is just trying to have a little fun too. And so I actually do kind of appreciate that movie more. I do like the actors that they have in the roles. Save Lex Luthor. I'm still not a fan of Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. And I remember Justice League. I remember thinking at the time, this is more of my style. I've always been more of a Marvel Cinematic Universe fan, but it doesn't make sense here. I don't see why they are suddenly making a third in this Zack Snyder trilogy, as I call it. Or at the time they did, but obviously that was not his film. But I didn't really understand why they were trying to make it so much like a Marvel movie, and it felt pretty goofy, slapped together. rushed, not focused on characters because they were trying to make a 2-hour movie out of something that shouldn't have been 2 hours, especially when you're introducing so many new characters, and was not into it. So then you hear more of the stories of what happened with Justice League years after, and then now they're making this new cut, which, like I said at the beginning, I wasn't a big Snyder fan, and I'm not a big fan of this series in general, and I was kind of happy that they moved away from it and started doing individual films, but the more they've talked about it, and the more I've seen and the more I've read, I'm actually getting pretty excited for the Snyder Cut. Do I think it'll be great? I don't know. We'll say that, every Snyder movie has had a director's cut. It's obvious that Warner Brothers trusted him up until Justice League for some reason. But they trusted him as a director, and they gave him probably room to create, but he always had a director's cut, so that was an immediate sign that every one of his movies probably couldn't be released in theaters the way that he wanted it to be released. So it makes me wonder on the production side how many times was he forced to cut corners, or how many times was he put in the creative box. And now with the Snyder Cut, he was given so much money to finish a movie that was already pretty much shot. A lot of the stuff was already finished for. It makes me wonder that this, in a technical sense, is probably the most free he's ever been on a movie, where he really is allowed to finish it the way he wants, even add some stuff and make it as long as he wants, because he doesn't have to worry about screen times or anything like that. You can just have it on the streaming service, be 4 hours long, okay. So possibly, maybe that's just the best version of himself. Maybe he's out making one of the best DC movies ever. So I get a little annoyed when people are being such naysayers about it. They're not happy that, oh, you're just giving the toxic fan base what they want. And it's like, well, they are, but they're also giving a lot of people, the majority of them who are not toxic, something that they really wanted. And what's wrong with that? And yeah, maybe it's not good to always answer to every demand that a fan base has, but it's like, this was a situation where that cut exists. It did exist. And it probably should have been made that way to begin with. It's a little unfair how everything went down. And, I've heard too people say, well, there must not have really been a cut because, if there really was a cut, as all these people were saying, then why are they putting $70 million into it to finish it? And I'm like, why are you being such a naysayer? Like, I feel like people like that are trying to treat the fans a little, like they're dumb. Like there was a cut, but it was a rough cut. Like every movie has a rough cut early on, and a lot of times they're already working on the special effects before they even start shooting. Like some of the special effects probably were finished, but not a majority of them. They take time, and then a lot of them, most of them, ended up getting retooled because they wanted to make it more like the Avengers. So they had to change most of them. So most of the movie probably was finished besides special effects, but they were given more money because they're actually adding to it. They're making it something different from the other movie, because you can't just, expand upon what the original movie was. You also want to make probably something new. And since there was stuff from the screenplay that was originally cut out of the original shooting that they did for the movie, now they have the opportunity to put that in. So stop being the naysayer. Just enjoy it. It's going to be cool. It's going to be awesome. I think it's an awesome idea. It doesn't mean the movie's going to be great. It might not be good still. There might still be problems with it, but I think it's cool that a filmmaker was actually given a chance at the same studio to finish what he should have finished to begin with. And for it to happen so soon, I think it's a win. So we'll see what that's all about in a month. But after rewatching some of the other Snyderverse movies and the Whedon Justice League, I'm excited to see the new cut and see what changes are made.